Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Life in the Peloton. This week, we've got Michael Freiberg on. Michael probably could do one or two podcasts on him. His whole career has had some amazing feats throughout it, and he's gone up and down. And just to run you through a little bit of background on Michael, he started as a junior. He had a really diverse career of racing. He at the beginning of his career represented Australia under 19, under 23, and then the senior on the track and also on the road. So he was looking like to just be a typical awesome cyclist, coming through the ranks, going to the World Championships. Then moving on into his senior ranks, he won the world title in 2011 in the Omnium event. He went on to the Commonwealth Games and won a gold as well and a silver there in Delhi in 2010. But then Michael, he stepped away from the bike after that. He wasn't in a place that he liked racing, and he wanted to develop a training device called the AIRhub. And we go into that a little bit in this podcast, so it's really interesting to hear about that too. After developing this for 4 years, Michael decided, you know what? I'm not done with cycling. I'm going to come back. And he came back in the best fashion after winning the Australian title earlier this year. He's now across in Europe, and that's where I ran into him. He's trying to make it pro. He's racing some races over in Belgium and around the rest of Europe as well, trying to show his stuff to the big teams over here. And that's where him and I got a chance to train together. And I knew Michael from racing over the years, but I'd never had a chance to really spend some hours talking. So out on the road, we got to listen to some of his theories and, chatted all over. And I was like, God, I've got to get you on the podcast. And so that's why I've got him on the pod today. So when you hear some of these series, you'll see he's a pretty smart guy, and he's always very interested and he's actually quite hilarious at times to pick his brain on different theories or, different things I've tried over the years. He's tried it or doesn't suggest to try it, or he does suggest to try it. And that's why he's pretty much the human mythbuster. If you haven't been able to tune into the last couple of podcasts, I want to also make mention of our new podcast platform who's helping us at the moment, called Wide Angle Podium. Now, you've got to go over and check out their other podcasts they got on there, a whole bunch of different cycling podcasts, which I enjoy listening to. It's at wideanglepodium.com. Go over and check that out. Check out all their other podcasts and feel free to donate to us as well. We'll be muchly appreciated and will help this podcast keep pushing forward. And also on another side note, if you have missed it, the new merchandise is out. Life in the Peloton official merch. Go down to lifeinthepeloton.com, go to the shop there and help yourself to some of the cool stuff there. I certainly have. So sit back and enjoy the Performance Mythbuster, Michael Freiberg. Cheers, guys. Alright, so we're in. We're going. Welcome, Michael Freiberg, Australian champion, the best rider in Australia for this year. I'm happy to have you on the podcast. You're over here in Girona, living the dream, trying to make it pro. And we're sitting up on my balcony in the heat of Girona. And we've had a bit of time together the last couple of months, and I've been preparing for the Tour de France and now preparing for the Vuelta, but I've had a bit of partner in crime, and I've been actually blessed to be able to train with you and actually get to know you a bit better. I knew you a little bit, but not as well as I thought. And I thought it was fantastic getting to know you on some of these long rides. And actually that just started the wheels in motion of like, hang on, there's a lot more to this guy than I really first thought. And that's what's led me to tonight to record this podcast. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mitch. It's great to be on board, listen to your podcast all the time, and thanks for the really nice introduction there.
If anyone doesn't know Michael, he's also a world champion on the track in the Omnium. He's also a Commonwealth Games gold medalist, teams pursuit. So he's across all spectrums, and as you're going to find out in this podcast why. Michael is a guy who doesn't just go along the normal road travelled by all of us, pretty much. He questions things. He goes, you know what? Why can't I do that? And if he doesn't know how or why, he just goes, well, let's just see why and explore it. But before we get into that, what I want to ask you is, how did you ever become a cyclist, first of all, but a cyclist who questions the normal? And from what I understand, before you were a cyclist, well, run me through your story of it. How did you get into cycling?
It was pretty simple, actually. Like it's the way most young guys get into cycling. It was actually a rehab, or everyone likes messing around on their bike, and then I got injured, and I started doing cycling for rehab, and it went from there. Family friends were down at the local cycling club for a triathlon. I joined along, and then we had a really cool core group of guys there, and it really blossomed from there. Like the competition through under 17s, under 19s was fantastic, and we had guys like Luke Durbridge, Cam Meyer, Travis Meyer, Sarah Kent, Josie Tomic, all come through in that core group of guys and ladies, and we worked through to the national level.
So you were the first in your family. Your sister was also a rider, but she was cycling after you. So you went down to the track and she decided to cycle after you, or she was first there, or how did that happen?
That's the great thing about club sports. Like, I'm one of 4 kids, and Mum and Dad worked really hard to give us the best upbringing they could. And so when one of your siblings starts a sport, I mean, everyone else gets in the car and they jump along. So I was riding reasonably competitively, and then my sister Lara, she also came along, and my little brother Lewis came along and raced, and they all did states and really enjoyed the sport. But I kept chasing it to the higher level.
So was that in the beginning back then when what age were you then when you started cycling?
I think it was about 16 or 17 when I started cycling, and I followed the program through the under 17s nationals, and really went from there. So
at what point there though were you like, you know what? Because from what I understand along the way, you were happy to, obviously cycling was a new thing anyway when you first started. You're like, well, like track cycling, everything's sort of new, you're changing your gears, you're just discovering how it all works. But at what point there were you always a person who, let's say, questioned what people were prescribing you? Like for instance, if someone said to me, when I was a junior, and I first always remember this, I like, on the track, ride this gear, it's a scratch race, you're going to need a 50 chainring with a 15 cog in behind, that's the best gear to ride. And I just like, yeah, cool, let's go, that's the best gear to ride. I wouldn't even think about it.
Absolutely. No, I see what you're asking there. I think that every competitive person has that questioning mentality. It's like, what if I do this? How do I tinker that? You see people changing the tyre pressure all the time and trying new tyres and faster chain lube and things like that. And so I think that's with competitive sport, you're always looking for that edge to go 1% better. And if you're a high performing person, or you love, if you've ever played any competitive games or like Monopoly or cards or anything, you're always looking for new strategies to optimize whatever you're doing. And I think that was part of it. So whether it was training where your coach says, go to 3 hours, you do 3 hours 15, just because, that little 15 more than your other mates that they don't know is happening, gets you better in a week's time or so. And then it's from a competitive nature, and it pushes you from there.
So tell me about when, and you'll have to excuse the bells, they're going to probably go off at random times here. There's no chronological order that the bells go off here. But you would have heard in another podcast. Tell me how Aldo fits in from Quantum Cycles. And from what I understand, this is a little bit further along in your journey. And I want to bring him in and then come back, is that I feel he was an important part of your sort of transition and that sort of like discovering like, I can push the limits here. And from what I understand is
Aldo's been a big part of it.
Yeah, tell me about him.
He's an interesting guy. He's a bike mechanic. He was a frame builder, He's got so many years of experience in the bike industry, and he came from that top end side of things, that racer mentality. Oh, we can make this faster. So he's sharing stories about how he changed the tube angles on bikes and changed the stiffness in the frame so that the bike would glide over bumps and cobbles and rocks much easier to get more speed. And he sort of described his analytical nature, where he went out on the road and they tested he put the wheels, bike wheels, I guess, in forks above the roof of the car, and then looked at their rotational speed. So he'd drive along at 40 k's an hour and you'd be able to aero test the wheels and see which wheel was quicker.
How?
I don't know, to be honest, but I think it's something to do with which direction the wheel was spinning and how much drag it created. And this is back in the 90s, you could test which wheel was quicker, even before the advent of power meters. So you're looking at tyre widths, you're looking at disturbances in airflow and stuff like that. And this guy really pushed the limits of all that. And so he was one of those first guys that was sort of like, there's gains to be made if you go out there and you test and you see, is it faster? Yes or no? That's the question. If it's faster, yep, perfect. Try it, write it down, try again. Is it faster? Yes or no? If it's not faster, okay, try the other way.
And so was this a guy who started opening up that sort of that avenue for you, or was that thought already happening for you in different areas?
He's the one that, like, I've always been competitive and tried lots of different things when I was younger. And you try and read books and learn about new subjects. I'm a pretty curious guy, and if you give me something to read, I'll read it and we'll look at it and see how we can make something new from it. But Aldo was just a wealth of ideas. He's the guy that gave me, we saw at the Olympics, the trip lines in the Great Britain skin suits. So we were like, let's do that, let's give that a go. And so we designed our skin suit. We got the Midland Cycle Club
skin suit. So wait, tell me about trip lines. So just for everyone out there who doesn't know what that is, it's on the Great Britain skin suits in what year was that,
2008, I think.
2008 Olympics. They came out with these skin suits and they had, what was it on the shoulders?
So whenever you've got like an object moving through the air, it creates drag. And the drag is normally the drag behind it, so it's the suction force. If you're riding behind a bus, you get sucked along, and so it's that big hole behind the bus which is causing the most drag. It's not necessarily the part of the front, it's the part of the back. And so
that blows a lot of people's minds, because you think about you pushing through the air, but it's actually the air that's trailing behind you makes you go faster.
Yeah, it's pulling you back.
Yeah.
So what these trip lines do is you put them on I think it's about the 30% and 15% of the way around your arm or leg, and what it does is it disturbs the airflow and makes it suck around the back of the arm or the leg much quicker, and makes that suction force a lot smaller. So if you get them in the right spot, you can make these skin suits that just go absolutely fly through the air. Like,
what are we talking about? Like, and when you say fly through the air, give me an example. So if someone's riding individually in an individual pursuit and they're pushing, just say to do a world record time, I don't know, 400 watts.
We're talking easily 15% quicker.
15%?
It's astronomical how fast these skin suits are going, yeah. The Great Britain skin suit technology is ridiculous. They've wiped the floor with everyone for the past, I don't know, how many Olympic cycles? 4 Olympic cycles, I think it was. So the Australian team, I've been part of the track program for, like 8 years or something I was. And you see Australia winning all the world titles, wiping the floor with everyone for the 3 years leading up, and even the World Championships that year. Then nothing changes at the Olympics except they change skin suit and they're quicker. Mark Cavendish was 8 seconds quicker between Worlds and Olympics in 2016.
15% quicker.
There you go.
You could say.
Exactly.
So tell me about then back with Aldo. So he heard about this, or he already thought of this before?
It's really old tech, but it's the implementation of it. So I think he grabbed this book from 1970 or something where it talked about airflow, because they were experimenting with airflow for years. But the advent of power meters and wind tunnel technology is really where you're able to measure the problem and then you can do those little marginal gains, like we said. Is it faster, yes or no? And then you pursue down that alley and see if something's quicker. And yeah, he got this really old book out that was falling apart, and he's like, this is how it works. This is the science that someone with a black and white photo has taken and put it in the book. And if we do this is you make it go faster.
And you did that?
We did that, but we never quite got it right, unfortunately.
Tell me about, just run me through the roughness of how you did it.
It was pretty rough. So
you had a skin suit, a normal
everyday skin suit, and then we got one of Mum's friends, who was a seamstress, to put like a ribbing through the arm at certain.
Or just like a piece of material.
Yep, in the arm at certain lengths around the arm, and that was the general concept of it. So.
And where did you test this out at? The Australian titles or something?
No, we never went to the Australian titles or anything like that with it. That was the part I was missing when I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
So I
got, right. Was that young?
Yeah. 18, 19 years old. I got the concept, understood the science, but my execution of the analytical side of it, and really testing and proving if it was quicker or slower, I didn't have that yet. I wasn't old enough to really knuckle down on that.
Well, fast forward me now then, you're in the Australian team and you're starting to make waves. This is fast forwarding quite a long way. You're fast forwarding and you're starting to make waves. You're in the team, you're pushing the boundaries, there's coaches there, and I've been in the Australian team a little bit too on the track, and there's certain hierarchy there you've got to abide by. You know, like you might want to do your own thing here and there, but you know, that's part of the team, and you've got to be a team and a unit and whatever, and you just got to roll that way. And I can imagine that didn't necessarily run perfectly with you, and there came a point, and this is a story I already knew before, there came a point where you're like, most people ride a crank length, which is from the crank down, you know, to drive the bike, a crank length of 17.5 centimetres or 172.5 millimetres, exactly. Or even shorter for sprinters. But suddenly you were like, why not 200 millimetres?
Yeah.
Tell me about this sort of whole story.
Yeah, I think this is probably the one was most famous for, me and my crazy long cranks. And it really butted head with a lot of cycling history, especially track riding history. And a lot of the coaches really didn't like that I wanted to do it this way. And it's a crazy idea. If at the time I didn't believe in it so strongly, it would have been absolutely ridiculous. But faster was faster. And that's all I saw. I didn't understand why they why they didn't like me using these long cranks. I'd ridden the short cranks and then I tested these long ones. I was like, I'm a tall guy. If we take the percentage of the leg length of a short person and they fit 172.5 millimetre cranks, and then if I take my leg length and the same percentage, I should be running about 200 millimetre cranks. And it made logical sense to me. If you have the right length crank, you use proportionally the same amount of glute and quad as everyone else did. But it just seemed to make a lot of sense.
It was just physics for you.
And it's obvious when you look at a tall person on a bike, those cranks look really small, even now. But a small person looks very proportionate, and everything's fine. So there was a lot of logical sense to it. But it was just so far removed from what was done that it caused a lot of problems.
Give me a little bit of history, a bit of background around that situation, because you were getting ready for the World Championships.
Oh, it was even before that. So I was in a lot of squads all the way from 2008, and I didn't even go to the World Championships until 2011. So it was my first time at the World Titles, and my only chance, and I ended up winning it, which was great. But
on these cranks?
Yes, on these cranks.
Was that like deep down? Was that sort of like a little semi-motive?
No. The winning the world championships was because I knew I was never going to get another shot, so I better get it right. That's what happened there. But in the lead up to that, with the long cranks, I did some pretty crazy stuff on the track. Like I was the first guy in the team to go under 2 minutes for a flying 2K in training on these super long cranks.
Was this ever changing their opinion at that time?
I don't know.
Were they just like, you know what? I hate to admit it, but this guy might be right.
I don't think we'll ever know that. But yeah, there was some pretty cool stuff that we did. And now looking back on it, like even going to the World Championships, I said to Dave McKenzie, he rang me up. They ran out of guys for the world titles. They needed to score points for the Olympics. They're like,
God damn it, we're going to have to use this Freiberg guy.
yeah, we're at the bottom of the list. We'll run out of points. We're not going to qualify for the Olympics. Going to have to use Freiberg. So yeah, they gave me a call. And I was like, can I use the long cranks? They're like, yeah, fine. Just do it. Just get the points. I was like, all right, great.
I'll get the points all right.
I'll get the points all right. But it's so interesting. So the long cranks, ultimately, they took about 4 seconds off my standing kilo time. So that's what we worked out in the end. So on normal length cranks, I was about a...
Well, tell me why though. Like for all the geeks out there, why?
So I didn't know at the time, but now I know a lot more about exercise physiology. It probably lies somewhere in the fact that when you do anaerobic efforts, you produce hydrogen ions. A lot of people call that lactic acid.
Yep.
Just think of them as the same thing. So these hydrogen ions, they leak into your muscles and they stop you from being able to contract hard. So like when you feel that burn, you're going up the hill, your muscle contractions slow down and you just can't produce any more force anymore. So with the long cranks, you only need 10% less force to produce the same amount of power. And so when that lactic acid started building up on me, I had 10% more room to produce more power, and that's why I went quicker.
So why wouldn't you keep going longer? Where is that limit stop?
So do you know
what I mean?
It's practicality.
Yeah.
Because I'm really tall, I can ride really long cranks. I definitely would not recommend people going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's more work than you need. If you're someone new to cycling, you're looking for the edge, don't go down crank lengths because it's a lot of hard work.
What were the negatives of it? Aside from fighting,
fighting the norm is probably the biggest side effect, and people think you're crazy. It's only if you're going to the Olympics and that you need that marginal gain, and it's about it. I did actually see recently actually quite a while back, there's a great article from Jim Miller. I think it's Jim Miller.
Who's he?
He's a crank length specialist, and in one of his presentations, he talked about how the influence of crank lengths on all different things. And in the end, he said there's no difference in performance on any different crank length. And I agree with that your performance is mainly limited by your cardiovascular system. So a lot of aerobic athletes think about that. But what long crank lengths do is that you fatigue per contraction. So if you're riding big cranks, you've got to ride big gears, less contractions, and it delays your time for the fatigue. And this is in the literature.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So tell me then, how does the red-violet cake lead to better recovery?
Oh dear. This is the problem of having family members on the production team. Yeah, this is a number of years ago. Oh, please, they're going to give me hell for that. They gave me hell for this for so long.
For everyone out there who doesn't know, tell us a little bit about the background of this theory.
Look, it's a really basic one where I was like, all right, in the science, they say you've got to have X amount of carbs, X amount of protein when you finish a ride. And ultimately, I wanted my cake and eat it too. So I was like, what better way than sitting down to a nice piece of red velvet cake at the end of your ride? Got all the carbs, everything you need to recover, and it makes me happy. Yep.
So you'd come home every day and have it at a cafe, or you just made your own red velvet?
No. There was this really nice cafe called Sherbet just down the road. And so I finished my rides there, tucked in there.
So is there an element to some of your theories to making things that you like, proving them to be performance enhancing, if you know what I mean? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
You know what? I love drinking beer, so I'm going to find a way that works for me, and I can prove that.
Look,
Does it work that way, or it comes the other way?
No. Eventually, you find the things that work and don't work, and ultimately, red velvet cake was something I had to let go. My family was very happy about that, but I prefer more of the normal techniques. Had to cut a bit of the fat out because ultimately, red velvet cake has a lot of fat in it.
Speaking of food, we got to talk about the corn era. And this is something that I've heard also, doing a little bit of research, that you'd done some research yourself, and this is 10 to 8 bell, the typical long 10 to 8 bell. You've done some research that corn gives you a good sort of, stomach bacteria, the the probiotics and stuff like that. So you're like, I'm going to just introduce a little bit more corn to my diet. But you didn't just like a normal person go and get normal corn and eat it and just introduce a little bit to your diet. You went, I'm going to get canned corn and just eat only canned corn. Is that how it went?
Oh dear. It's not as extreme as people make it out to be. There's a lot of research out there on the gut microbiota. And if you have really healthy gut microbiota, you create short chain fatty acids. And they're really anti-inflammatory, and they give you good health and make sure you absorb all your food. There's a lot of nutrients in corn. There's a lot of different foods you can eat, but if you pin yourself to something a little bit more healthier than the other options out there, like cake, then you're gonna possibly be better in the long run.
Why didn't you look at things like, probiotics or a kombucha or even sauerkraut or things like that? Why was it corn?
Corn's one of those really ubiquitous foods. It's canned, easy transportable, available all over the world. You look at, corn's still one of my favourites because the Kenyan runners was one of their staple diets.
Was it?
Yep, it's like a maize, maize is corn, but it's like a ground corn, and they eat it as, it's almost like polenta, I think it is. And they eat that as their staple diet before they go training and for recovery. That mixed with like leafy greens, almost like a spinach type thing. So they get their carbohydrates, and they also get a lot of their B vitamins, nitrates and stuff from the green vegetables. And they really live a simple diet. And so I was like, all right, let's include a bit of corn in here. It's going to keep me healthy, keep my gut healthy, keep me regular, and went from there.
Where did it tip over to, I'm going to introduce a little bit of corn here, to I'm only going to eat corn?
No. Okay, let's be honest. It didn't go to just, I was only going to eat corn. But there's no harm in introducing a little or a lot of corn into your diet. I can go from there. And I'm not sponsored by Corn Board.
Oh, God, the old corn diet. Let me look back here, because there's a couple of things now, getting a little bit more serious, because this is something I did want to talk to you about. This is something that has happened over the last few years, and a transition out of that whole Australian program into where you are now. In between those two sort of periods was this amazing invention that you developed called the AIRhub. And after doing a little bit of research about you, I heard about this thing that you did way back where you put some water into your tyres to create resistance. And you can explain this a little bit more, but it was about, you're out training, you're like, I want more resistance so I can train with the same people and have more resistance than them. And then the second thing, which was probably a bit more down the road, was creating resistance with some lights. And I think from hearing those two stories, I was like, hang on, was that sort of the seed that grew the AIRhub? So what I'm asking is, tell us a little about the AIRhub at the end, but about these two sort of things beforehand.
Okay, let me just make things clear to start with, that the pendulum is swinging very wildly at the start of this podcast, and there's a lot of crazy ideas being thrown around.
Exactly, I wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, let's just get that out there. And I look back on some of the things I've done, and I'm like, man, that is out of control, and you should dial it back a few steps. But the pendulum's getting closer to the mean, and we're getting some really good science behind the ideas now, and starting to see some really great results. And so the waters in the tyre thing is one of those ones where it was the start of analysing how what you do on the bike can change what happens in races. So waters in the tyres, very simple. Let's make the bike heavier. Lee Howard used to train with a bidon of sand in his bike, make it heavier. So that on race day, take the bidon out, it's a kilo of weight gone, boom.
Simon Gerrans used to put lead in his frame to climb up Mount Buller. Same thing. There you go, yeah.
There you go. So yeah, waters in the tyres, it's rotating mass. So I think you can put about 1.2 kilos of water in 2 by 25 mil tyres. So front and rear.
Normal tyres, or
Yep.
they had to be...
No. If it can hold air, it can hold water.
How did you do that?
So what I did, I had to sacrifice a track pump unknowingly at the time. So I had a track pump and I got the hose from my garden hose and turned the tap on. And then you know how you pump, when you lift the pump up, it sucks in air through the top. So you put the water where the air would go in and it sucks in the water. And then you push it down and the water goes into the tube. So pretty simple mechanism. Takes a little bit of fiddling to get right because there's trying to push air in there, you've got to get air out, put more water in.
So instead of air, you had water?
Yep, so I put water into the tubes.
Could you create that pressure, or were they still a bit squidgy?
It's still a bit squidgy. You can try and you had to get a little bit of air in there, but it's still not ideal. You can get them up to like 80 psi, so.
Crazy.
Yeah, but no, it worked really well actually. It's one of those ones that you've written down in the journal saying, if you ride around with 1.2 kilos of water in your tyres, it really improves your acceleration and seated power. So when you are accelerating a heavy mass, your almost like neuromuscular capacity from all the traffic lights and all the little kicks, and when you're rolling through in a group, has to increase because you're accelerating and decelerating mass so quickly.
But once you're at speed, you didn't notice too much of a difference.
Yeah, there was a lot of roll, but you'd be surprised at how much your speed changes through a ride. But ultimately, water in the tyres is a bit difficult when you get a puncture. So I had to transition across to lead weights on the rim. Much better application, works great.
Would you evenly put that around the rim, or
Yep.
just put in one spot?
No, all the way around the rim with stick-on car weights for balancing car wheels, and that's the same thing. So if you're training for a crit season, you have heavy wheels, and so you do all your training on the heavy wheels, hard to accelerate, decelerate, and then you go crit racing, take the heavy wheels off. Man, it is like you were just floating out there, because that's where the difficulty is in crit racing. It's the acceleration.
But couldn't you do that just with like simple, like I'm going to ride box rims, Mavic rims, and then ride lightweight wheels in a crit?
It's the same sort of idea.
But not as extreme.
Yeah, but not as extreme. People forget that we're a product of our environment. So if all you know is living in Colombia at 3,000 metres, riding up steep 10% climbs, you're going to be, and then you come back down to sea level and you ride around with with normal people, you're going to be unbelievable climber. Or if you're always riding in crosswinds and you know how to deal with crosswinds, you're going to be unbelievable in the crosswinds. So if you happen to ride...
Because it becomes a norm for you.
It is.
So when it becomes a crosswind, you're just like, and?
And it's normal. And you know how to pedal and you know how to do it.
Yeah.
Just like Swano on the potty last week with his riding the Kmart bike around.
Yeah.
That guy did thousands of Ks on Kmart bike. And then you put him on a regular roadie and he's world class. So you're a product of your environment. And so the way I approached it was like, if this becomes the new normal and then I go put on the expensive stuff, we're going to be at an advantage.
So that was the water and the wheels.
Yep.
Was that starting to plant the seed like after the water and the wheels and the lead weights, you're like, you know what, I could actually probably develop something better than this, or was way too far beyond that?
It took a couple of years. It took quite a number of years actually to get to that next level. Yeah, it took a number of years. Where water in the tyres was great and it did its job. It was able to slow me down. It was able to improve my power output on the flat. I could train with a few more partners. Problem was I couldn't turn it off when I needed it. And yeah, basically I couldn't turn it off. So when I was in Italy at the training at the AIS, I had this same problem where I was getting really fit. And when I do my tempo sets, I'm going 45 Ks an hour and it's just not sustainable, not safe. Nobody wanted to ride with me, or nobody could ride with me on those specific days. And I thought there's a better way of doing this. And that's where the AIRhub idea came from.
What about the lights though?
Oh, so the lights, that was the first thing I did when I got back from Italy that year. I was like...
So after this revelation in Italy, you're like, AIRhub or something.
Yep, something.
And you went home and the lights.
Yeah, so what I did is I got a e-bike motor, big 250 watt thing, reconfigured the wiring inside of it to produce power.
How did you do that? Is that something you just knew already, or you had to go, I'm going to try and do this, or you're always researching, or you just got that sort of mind?
Yeah, look, I research and read everything. So if you want to work out how to do something, what do they say? With the Wi-Fi connection and an inquisitive mind, you can achieve anything. And so I sort of took that to heart, and you read how magnets and wires and voltage work, and
trial and error.
Trial and error, yeah. I got some money together. It cost me probably like $1,000 or $500, and then went and bought up all the e-bike motors in the local area, and started opening up, reconfiguring the wires to be able to produce power. And that's where it started. So I had an e-bike motor powering a light through a switch to produce resistance. And so when I wanted resistance, I turned the big 20 amp switch on, power went through the light, and had resistance. And
so only on an e-bike?
No, so I had to really modify my road bike to make it fit, because they don't make e-bike motors for road bikes. In the wheel, so you had a big 20mm axle and had a lot of.
So the resistance was in the wheel.
Yep, same as what the AIRhub looks like.
Okay.
Same idea. Yep. But where we've got to today with the AIRhub is that it's like 5 kilos light. It's like 1.5 kilos compared to 7 or 8, 9 kilos with the e-bike motor. It's quick release into your bike. That's something I needed, because you can't have your race bike with big filed out dropouts, just not safe.
Does an e-bike power from the rear wheel or from the front wheel?
Front wheel. So front wheel's so much easier in every way, because you don't have to fiddle with clusters and gears and spacing, and you wouldn't believe how many different size spacers and metrics and...
So that's how an e-bike is powered. Same idea as an AIRhub?
Yep.
From the front wheel, that drives it?
Yep. Most of them, the cheaper versions do that, yeah. Some of the more expensive ones have rear wheel drive if they're higher power, but they're going to cost you more, and you may have to buy a special bike to fit them.
And so the idea back then, when you thought, how do I reverse an e-bike, when you were riding with that wheel, the warped version of the e-bike wheel on your road bike,
yep,
that was just sort of doing reverse?
Yeah, so it was an e-bike motor in reverse, short-circuiting itself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a light. Why do you need a light?
So when you, to create resistance, you need to burn off energy. So I used the big 100 watt light to burn off all the extra energy that was slowing me down. And then I was able to control it as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then after you were doing this light experiment for a while, were you just like, hang on, this is just got to be, I got to do something about this?
Yeah. Very quickly, as soon as I rode it, I was like, wow, this is incredible.
It works.
It works. The Frankensteins Alive.
Yeah.
So if I could get this to a way where, so I'd be riding down the road on the bike path, 5 minutes from my house, hit the bike path, boom, turn on the light, and I'd be able to do it 300 watt effort straight out of the gates. And I'm like...
At like 25k an hour.
25, 30k an hour. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Normally I'd have to drive an hour. I could race myself around the block and get 40-minute workout in, just like that. Whereas having to build up the mental capacity to go out, all right, I have to do 3 hours today, you get the same training effect in 40 minutes, just because there's more resistance. It's like here, we go out here, straight up a climb, and it's fantastic. And so that's when I really started thinking, I have to...
There's got to be more people out there who want this.
Exactly. And then you're thinking like, well, I could hook it up with varying degrees of control, where I could control from a smartphone. It could listen to your heart rate monitor and adjust the resistance to keep you in a training zone. We can have it automatically do intervals. We can listen to your power meter. We can have it controlled in so many ways. And this is the next step. We've got all our lab-based training indoors. Let's bring that outdoors where people want to be. People want to be outside. They don't want to be indoors. No. Yeah.
And so at that point, though, in your career, were you thinking then, was there a transition there of like, okay, originally you developed this product to make you better as a cyclist, but as I'm listening to you now, it's starting to develop into sort of a business sort of idea. Hang on, there's more people out there that want this, and maybe this could be something cool to make, and there's a bit of a transition there because as a pro cyclist, it's no longer about you anymore. To develop this solely for you, or was it?
So the idea was, when I was looking into all of this, I think Bradley Wiggins was winning the Tour, and you're looking at how fast they're climbing. They're climbing at 5.86 watts per kilo, and you do a little bit of maths, and you're like, all right, if I want to win the Tour de France, I have to do 6 kilos, 80 kilos, 480 watts for an hour. I'm like, that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. But not only is that ridiculous for 1 hour, you work back the training zones, because everyone's got their training zones, like your tempo zone, your endurance zone. Your tempo zone, if you've got a threshold that high, is like 400 to 450 watts. Your endurance pace is like 320 to 400 watts or 380 watts. So if you're riding
it's like
around
45k an hour.
45k an hour. I'm like, no wonder nobody has a threshold of 480 watts, because nobody can ride for any amount of time at 45k an hour. Nobody can train with anyone that's riding at 45k an hour.
You're just clocking off loops.
That's it. You go on warp speed, and no wonder nobody can go that fast, because it's just not practically possible to get the training load in to be able to support an engine that big. And so I was like, let's do it. Let's give it a crack. If you want to be if you set your sights on the Tour de France and you want to be as good as Bradley Wiggins, you got to start at the bottom, and you're definitely never going to get there unless you build the AIRhub, because it's not mathematically possible to be able to train to the ability of that. It's all right if you lived in Tenerife and you did laps of the volcano every day, but I didn't have that available to me. I lived in Perth, and there's no big climbs there.
And there's also the psychological factor of that too. We can all achieve that. Like you said, going up Tenerife every day or sitting on an ergo and doing it every day, but we're not putting in the psychological factor. The thing that the AIRhub allows is, like you said, I can go training with my mates. I can even go training with my wife or my girlfriend, which I know that Luke does, Luke Durbridge.
Yep.
He has the AIRhub, and he goes, I do my recovery rides or my easy rides with his wife, Lara. She cruises along. He can do his hard effort next to her, and no one's the wiser.
Yep.
Whereas before, he was just boosting off and just leaving her out in the middle of nowhere, and she'd have to get home.
Yeah, we did some really incredible training this year before Nationals, where we're on the bike path, and we're doing our tempo effort at 350 to 400 watts, and we're doing 35 k's an hour. Nobody's none the wiser.
Yeah.
Someone's got a normal endurance day, and you can have your specifics on that day. You go out together, you meet at the coffee shop, you go out together, you do your work right next to them, and you're doing what has to be done to get the result. And you're becoming a better athlete. And that's something that would never have been possible if we didn't have the AIRhub to be able to control the resistance.
And I think the AIRhub, and everyone needs to go and check out the AIRhub. Give it a plug now. What's the website?
airhub.com.au.
Go and check it out, because there's a whole podcast on the AIRhub, and there's a whole story behind that 3-year period of the building it, or 2-year?
It was about 5 years.
5 years.
5 years, yeah.
5-year period, which I've spoken to you about, which is an awesome pod too, but we're not going to touch on it today. But one thing I want to, and you just touched on then, one thing I want to talk to you about is, quickly at the end here, is this lead up to the Nationals. This is, I think, something else that I love about you too, is that, and this is the whole theme of this podcast, is that I find with a lot of professional sportsmen, especially professional cyclists, is that they're a little bit scared to go out on a limb and just go, you know what, that's my goal, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to commit 100% to that. And, because at the end of the day, you could fail, and everyone's like, yeah, I told you you'd never do it, And the Nationals, you can tell me a little bit more about this, but from what I see from the outside was, I want to come back. I want to go pro. This is a couple of years in the making. Came back to the Australian scene, started setting the world on fire again. How am I going to become professional? Well, I need to ride Tour Down Under. How am I going to ride Tour Down Under? I need to ride a good Nationals result. Okay, I'm going to train for the Nationals and ride Tour Down Under, and I'm going to go on from there. And that's where we're at now. But lead me up to the Nationals, because I don't think anyone in their wildest dreams would have thought Michael Freiberg would have won the 2019 Nationals on the course that it is. You know, like given another course, you know, an undulating sort of finish with a bit of a flat sprint with a bit of crosswind, I would have said, yeah, Freebs is up. But that type of course, it's hell for me, and I would think for a guy like you too. But tell me about that lead up and that thought process to this year's victory.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's quite a few months in the process, and it's exactly as you said. I was like, I'm coming back. I need to go pro. I need to race Tour Down Under. If you want to race Tour Down Under, you've got to be the best non-pro to be able to get a spot. Well, apparently now to be able to have the chance to have the spot. And then even further to that, another cat among the pigeons is you've got to be on whereabouts, which was a rule they brought in recently. So there was a few things that had to line up in order to get there. And so I had to start planning this out back in, I think it was in September, where we raced Tour of China, had a great couple of weeks in China, did really well, and then we shut it down for a month and started playing the rebuild. So we did a 2-month rebuild internationals. And
when you say we, who's that?
I use the word we because I don't know. I did a 2-month rebuild.
What about your partner?
Yeah,
well, she's involved in this.
Absolutely.
Or is Luke
there's a lot
as well,
of people
your family.
Yeah, there's a lot of people support structures that have to allow you to do these things. Like if I'm riding all day, every day, you have to have really understanding family and partner. And my girlfriend Sinead, she was like, yeah, babe, go win nationals. You can do it. And so we had this idea of coming to Europe this year. So while I was training, she was working. So she shaved up a big chunk of money so we could come away and pay for accommodation and rent while we're in Europe this year. And I'd be out on the bike. And so the plan was, I think I pegged it about 800 Ks a week for 8 weeks into the lead up into nationals. And then within that, I had great training partners in Luke Durbridge and Matt Burton, and we worked a bit of intensity in that and went from there.
Mm. And in that build-up, it was just like, you know what, I need to achieve. Was there ever the scope of I'm going to win nationals, or was just that good result at nationals?
I had to be on past years we made the assumption that you had to be the best non-pro at the nationals to get that wild card spot into the national team, which has happened a few times in the past, and so that's what we were targeting. It was interesting this year that I had to win it to be the best non-pro with Chris Harper in second, and so I knew I had to be fit. I'd raced it a couple of times. And
did that cross your mind in the race? Holy shit, I'm going to have to win this thing. If I want to do down under, I'm going to have to win this bloody thing.
No, it actually happened a couple of weeks earlier when they put the press release out, and and there was only one spot remaining. So
The winner.
Yeah, so basically I had to go very, very well in order to get the spot.
Did that dampen your spirits at the time?
No, well, we'd done the work by the point, like for the 4 weeks out or so, where I knew we were going to go well. We'd been better than all the previous years, performance-wise in the tempo and the top end stuff that we were doing, and yeah, I had faith in the program that I was able to. It was going to be good.
Your program.
Yep. Yeah, my program that I was going to have if not the legs on the day, even if I had a bad day, I was going to have a good ride because of the robustness we'd built. So one of the things that I've been focusing on the last few years is almost like one of my little points that I write down is almost performance probability. So with cycling, it's a sport where you can't just go out there and say I'm going to win today, because it doesn't work like that. Like there's so many factors that can happen. You could puncture, you could have a crosswind, you could crash. So it's about optimizing your performance probability for success on the day. And the way we improve my performance probability for nationals is that if the race was on from the gun, you had to go 5 hours full gas.
Wait. For anyone who doesn't know the Australian Nationals, it's 180k it's 18 laps.
Yeah, about 18 laps.
18 laps of a circuit, or a 10.5k circuit, let's say 17 laps, something like that, with about a 6-minute climb.
6 minute, yeah.
6-minute climb, descent, small little up and down, flat to the finish, 6-minute climb.
Yep.
Okay, it's more or less climb, descent.
Yep.
Just want to give everyone a background who doesn't know. We're just assuming everyone knows the Australian putting on course.
No.
But yeah, anyway.
So yeah, I had to be robust enough to go 5 hours full gas, or when it came down to it in the last hours, have great legs and be feeling fantastic that I can go with all the big moves in the last 2 hours. And so we really built the program around endurance, strength, and that. So even if I punctured, I had enough energy reserves in the tank to ride back on and keep chasing that result.
What about, so I'm hearing all this and I'm believing it as a fellow cyclist and understanding the physical level of it all. One thing I'm not hearing is the psychological side of things. What is going on with you psychologically? Are you completely going, I'll deal with that later, and just ignoring that fact? Or are you aware of how you are psychologically and you just work, as long as you know you've done the work, psychologically, you're ready to go? What happens with you in a race? Because for me, I have my coach and I need to know that I'm ready for a race. But then once I get to a race, it's a whole nother ball game. Even if I'm ready for that race, doesn't necessarily guarantee that I'm going to be good in that race. Because psychologically, if I'm not on, for whatever reason, mentally into it or in the zone or whatever the hell it is, I could just have a shit day. So tell me about how it works for you. Because it sounds like for me, to a degree, you were a man with robots early on in your life, in robotics at school. Are you a robot when it comes to the race, knowing that you've got all the numbers in there?
No, it's actually quite the opposite. I think of myself as a bit of a racer. So no matter what the lead up has been, you just go out there and give it a crack. If you race in tricycles, give it a crack. See if you can make something from the situation. But what I do rely on a lot is hard work. So if you do the work, you're going to have the best chance on race day, because you can pull rabbits out of a hat, but it gets a lot harder if you haven't done the preparation beforehand. Even when we raced Worlds, and I won the world title there, that was pulling rabbits out of a hat. We'd done the work, going really well, but I think we were like few points down on Viviani and Archibald in the points race, and in the scratch race, the second last event, and we were in a break together, half a lap up, and I was like, this is not going to work mathematically. It doesn't work. Like I have to get in front of them because they're going to beat me in a kilo. So I swung up, dropped out of the break, went back to the back of the bunch, and then had to reconfigure the race in order to put 7 people in front of them, and for me to win the race in the end. So it's a lot about thinking on your feet, making it up as you go. But if you've got a really big engine to do that, it makes it so much easier. So in nationals specifically, where the opportunity arose where there was 4 of us that went away, and it happened to be the 4 strongest guys in the race. I know how well Chris Harper's going, I know how well Durbo was going, and we're down the road and they're like, this is fantastic. Things look great.
Were you doing mass out there? I'm doing 400 up this climb, I'm doing 300 down this climb. Technically, we've got 5 minutes on the bunch. For them to get across to us, they're going to have to do 480 up that climb. Were you doing like that sort of stuff?
No, I wasn't. I was in quite a lot of hurt, actually. The way the race panned out was I was actually suffering quite a lot at the start of the race. Didn't have quite as good climbing legs as the rest of the guys, but I think that saved me because they were climbing a lot faster and they were doing a lot more damage to themselves. Towards the end of the race, when they slowed down, I hadn't done the damage because I couldn't do the damage, and my legs were still there. So
the old scenario of when you got the best legs, you're doing stupid things. the worst legs, you end up winning the race because you protect yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I think at one point I'm just happy to get to the finish line here. You know, you're riding away from me. But yeah, it ended up going well in the end.
Yeah, nice, mate. Well, look, we've got to go get some dinner tonight, but I think we've touched on a little bit of who you are. There's a whole lot of like, when I thought about doing you tonight, it was like 2 or 3 different sort of podcasts, but then your sister came up with this great idea of like the human mythbuster, and I think we've sort of touched on a few of your little myths. I reckon there's a million others out there that either no one knows about or haven't been brought up.
Quiet. Yep.
But I'm sensing a big year for you next year, I hope. But it's been fun catching up with you tonight.
Thanks very much. Yeah, looking forward to having a crack. Keep working away. Keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and yeah, see you next year.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed another great episode there, talking to Michael. He's got some fantastic ideas there, and I really love picking his brain and listening to the way he's come through the ranks to where he is today. And I really do hope he can make that jump next year over here into Europe, because he'd be a great guy to have around. And we love it when you guys get back in touch with us to let us know what you think of the episodes or some feedback. So feel free to get in touch with us at Instagram and Twitter at Life in the Peloton, or just send us an email through lifeinthepeloton.com. Make sure you go down and check out some of that new merchandise at lifeinthepeloton.com, because 100% of those proceeds are going back into this podcast, and that's what helps keep this thing driving along. So I'd really appreciate your support there, and plus you get to wear the sweet merchandise. Again, go and check out Wide Angle Podium Network at wideanglepodium.com. And I want to say thanks again to Lara, my producer, who's helping me behind the scenes. She's doing a lot of great work there too. So guys, until next time, tune in. I'll be getting ready for the Volta of España, so make sure you tune in and watch me climbing up and down those mountains in Spain. Cheers, guys.